Hello, everybody, and welcome to Athletic Definition. My name is Coach Ray, and today my guest is Coach Stu Venable. Yes, and uh, man, looking at your bio, well, I met Stu through a training group named ATG, and I got to see a couple of his presentations, and I was definitely impressed. And then when you sent me your bio, I realized, wow, you have even more knowledge than I knew, and I had already seen like maybe two of your presentations. So, you know, on your presentation, you were talking about you kind of started off a little bit on the military and went on from there. But I always like to know, as a child, did you start like playing sports? Were you active? Did your family encourage that, or was that like something not even like big in your family?
Hey, thanks, Coach Ray. I appreciate you having me on. Interesting question. I've never had that question before, so that's really interesting. No, playing sports was not recommended by my family. As a matter of fact, my mother was dead set against it. I was the oldest of four children, and and my mother was a single parent. So in her eyes, I needed to work to help her with my siblings. So I never had the opportunity to play team sports as a child. We played a lot more than kids do now because we didn't have any video games or anything. But I wanted to run track and I wanted to play football, and she flat out refused to let me do either of those. So after school every day, I went to work from from grade school on. And I remember distinctly after I had started lifting and after I went into the service thinking, man, like I could have played ball probably at a high level because I was getting pretty big and I was pretty strong. I was like, I could have played ball until I got stationed in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. And some of the NFL players came over for the Pro Bowl. And I realized, no, I couldn't have played ball at the high level because those guys were fast and I wasn't that. So hopefully
Yeah,
that makes sense. That answers your question.
no, it does, and yeah, those NFL guys when you see them in person, that it's a whole different playing field right there. And actually, also thank you for your service as well.
You're
Um,
welcome.
and part of your presentation, the last one that I saw, you talked about I think you would at least backpack with a 100 mile, I mean 100 pounds or 120 easily every day when you were in the military.
Yeah. Backpack. That's pretty much the standard issue. So when you hear of soldiers that are downrange, when you are training or you go downrange, when you have all of your gear, it comes out between 100 and 120 pounds of gear that you're literally carrying every day because you have everything you need to survive, plus weapons, ammo, explosives, other tactical gear, night vision devices, whatever you need. So standard issue is between 100 120 pounds.
And that, I think that's when I first heard you mention kind of feeling injuries and that there's common injuries as well. Uh, at the time, did you feel anything, or too much like when you're young, you feel like you're invincible too as well.
Right. At that age, and I went in like right out of high school. Within a week of my high school graduation, I was in service. And you're young. You feel like you're immortal. Not really pain, but you might feel a little tired or soreness from something. But your back hurting because you carrying a pack. You just figure, well, I take the pack off for a few hours, or tomorrow I'll feel better. And that's the good thing about youth, that you're resilient enough that you can bounce back. That most of us didn't start really feeling those injuries until we were in our 30s, actually.
Okay, so is that when you kind of first started feeling like the military injuries? I know I have family who's been in the service, and also they went on to the police force. So just from wearing those all the equipment, it's messing up their back and everything else. It's heavy equipment to be running around and carrying all day. It's not normal.
Right. And it's not normal. And when I think about it now, it interferes with your gait. The way your muscles normally balance your body, it doesn't do it anymore because you have imbalanced loads that you're carrying around with you every day, both in the military and when I was in law enforcement. So it's just an unusual profession to be in, but the requirements for the profession and the equipment required put you in circumstances where there's a price to pay, and there's a price to pay for everything, but there's a price to pay for that. But like I said earlier, you don't pay that until later on in life, and we always said that's when that's why the government, we call them Uncle Sam, wants you because you're young then, and they get you in the prime of your life where the military always said, hey, we want you with a strong back and a weak mind. We'll tell you what to do. You just do it. So that's kind of
And,
part.
and yeah, I mean, they definitely want you when you're young.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Nobody's going in service, 40 and 50 years of age, and nobody's going in the police force. The same thing. When I worked for the Department of Justice, you can retire. I retired at 50 years of age, and it's mandatory retirement at 57 because when you're older, you can't do that.
right, and I wanted to kind of ask, did you started getting? I know you got into lifting. Or was it in the service or after you got out of the service?
No, honestly, I got into lifting when I was a kid, like you said, because my mother wanted me to work and I wasn't allowed to play sports. She did concede that on my 12th birthday, which was in October, that following Christmas, so 2 months after my 12th birthday, she bought me a set of weights from a store called Seals and Roebuck back in the day. And there were those plastic weights that had the sand inside, the concrete inside, and the little skinny bench. And I think York was the company that was making them back then. It was 110, 115 pound set. So she purchased that for me. So that was my first. That was my first weight training set. It came with a 1 or 2 page sheet of instructions to tell you some of the basic lifts, what you should do. So that's when I actually started lifting. And I said, I was just talking to one of my peers because I'm a high school teacher now, and I said, my mom probably wasn't sure what I was going through when I was a kid because most kids my age had posters of Farrah Fawcett Majors and other supermodels, and I had Arnold Schwarzenegger and Franco Columbo and Lou Ferrigno on my wall, when I was a teenage boy. So it probably kind of threw her off a little bit.
Yeah, that's a bit funny, but I think they were heroes to a lot of young men, Lou Ferrigno and Arnold, and so then in high school, because currently right now you're a high school coach, correct?
That's correct.
And so in high school, did any coach try to recruit you since you were already kind of lifting young? Did they try and get you to play any sports?
No, Coach. So what you have to bear in mind is I grew up in the South. I went to high school in the middle '70s, and there was very little weight training equipment. It was outside in a concrete building, and you could only use it if you were actually playing a sport. So I wanted to lift, but because I wasn't playing a sport, I was denied the right to use the equipment. And
Wow.
as a young man, that didn't set too well with me either. So I always think that contributes to me, always fighting for the underdog and want everybody in the weight room, not just the quote football player, not just the baseball player, what have you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And then after that, I know you got into powerlifting and then went into Olympic lifting after that. How was the lifting, or like for you, like what was provided by the military? Did you have a chance to lift, or too much, too much with time, too much lack of time to train since you're already doing a bunch of like hiking and time out on the field, basically?
No, that's when I really got into my lifting when I was in the military. Um, I was I didn't know what I was doing, but I was smart enough that I could tell that the lifting made me stronger in the physical training the Army put us through. And you have to bear in mind, I went in the service in 1981, and no one in the military, the big thing was sit ups, push ups, 2 mile run, body weight exercises, and a lot of grass drills. Uh, it was still pretty much the frame of mind that if you lifted, you would get big, you would get bulky, you would get slow, and then you would hold us up. And what the military wanted was mean, lean fighting machines, and they echoed that in our heads over and over again. But I wanted to lift, and they had some really nice facilities to be back in the late '70s. The early '80s. Some really nice training facilities, but it just wasn't encouraged for soldiers to lift.
Mm. And then after you got out of the military, is that when you started pursuing it more into
Well,
the powerlifting?
I was stationed. My first duty station was Fort Wainwright, Alaska, in Fairbanks, and my second duty station was Schofield Barracks in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I was lifting. But if you've ever been to the island, you know there are a lot of Polynesian people, and they are genetically gifted. So even though I thought I was putting on size and I was strong, I wasn't anything compared to those guys. The funny part is that I was lifting and I was doing good enough that they noticed me and they took me under their wing to help me because I had some natural strength, some God given strength. So they wanted me to do powerlifting, and at the time I was still stuck in that Franco Colombo, Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilding stuff. So they started me with the powerlifting because I was already strong. So they showed me the proper technique and how powerlifters train, and that's how I got bitten by the powerlifting bug. And I competed as a powerlifter for 16 years before I got into the Olympic weightlifting.
Wow, so 16 years as a powerlifter and competing. Okay.
Yes, yes.
And then did you compete in the Olympic as well, like
Yeah,
competitions?
yeah. Yes. So I did that backwards, and I regret that. But you don't know what you don't know, and we didn't have the internet like then. You waited for magazines to come out, and every now and again a book. So I started the powerlifting, and I started training other people. And I think I talked about this in one of my presentations, that whatever I was doing at the time is how I was training my clients. And so when I was being a bodybuilder and thinking I was doing bodybuilding things, whatever clients I had, I trained them like bodybuilders. We got chest and tries and back and bis and leg day. And when I started the powerlifting, when I got clients in, I started training them like powerlifters. So, we're going to bench twice a week, we're going to squat twice a week, and we're going to deadlift once a week. So whatever I was doing at the time was what my clients did at the time. And now I look back at it and I laugh. I was like, people didn't know what I knew, but they were paying me to train them based on how I looked at the time. So it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think that to this day it still happens. People will pay people based on how they look and their physique. Um,
Right. Right, right. You look at any social media account now. Everybody is a coach now. Everybody is an online coach now. And I was like, man, maybe if I post my photos of what I look like in '82, maybe I get some online clients. Nobody wants to see a 59-year-old man without his shirt on and in his fitness shorts. But when I was 22, it was a different story. So I told my wife, I'm gonna put my picture up there from when I was 22, and then the online clients are flocking. Then you end up with 50,000 followers, and people going to send me your program because I know whatever 10 times, 20 times more than I knew then. I didn't know anything then, and I had so many people wanting to train with me, and so many people just throwing money at me to train, and I had no idea what I was doing.
yeah, I guess that's probably kind of common, and it's even now. There's no regulation online. It's like the Wild West. So you're right. Anybody can be a coach. And even now, I have certifications, but gyms won't accept them. Like the ones I have, like a U.S. track and field level
Right.
one. I have a kettlebell certification. I have a different running certification. And then I'm working on the ATG. But if I go to like a Bally's or a LA Fitness, or those are the ones over here, 24, they won't accept me. They want the NASM and I forget the other one. Uh, and online, you don't even need to have one certification at all. You could just say you're a coach and that's it.
Yeah.
There's no regulation, and if you have a nice physique, people will throw money at you.
That's right. That's exactly it. You have a six pack and put some baby oil on and flex. It's a done deal.
And on that presentation, you mentioned you had 14 surgeries, and five of them were back surgeries, and you didn't
Yeah.
want to give up. I know I've been injured, been stubborn, and want to keep training. But when was the first time you got like seriously hurt that you had to have surgery? And what was it? Was it like improper training or trying to do too much?
Yeah, at the time, so my wife and I hadn't got married. We were still dating. So it was 1999. I get out of my truck. I pull in the driveway, get out of my truck, get out, and my keys fell out of my hand. And I bent over to pick up my keys, and I couldn't stand back up. So I'm yelling for my wife to come and help me because I literally couldn't straighten up. So she helped me in the house while I was all bent over, and she helped me in the house and got me to the bed. And I was probably bedridden for 2 or 3 days. I mean, she literally. We had a shower at the time with a lip that maybe 2, 3 inch lip, and I couldn't raise my foot to step over that lip. My wife was lifting my leg to to get me into that shower. Um, and that was the first time. After about 3 days, I went in to see the doctor, and then they did the MRI and the X-ray first, then the MRI, and I ended up having my first back surgery. I want to tell you, it was within that year. So 1999, I think, is when I had my first back surgery. And then once I had the surgery, it still hurt. My back still felt bad, and the doctor said, "Well, no, Stu, it's your back is fixed. That pain you feel is from something, the arthritis as a side effect of the surgery." He said the back is healed. I said, "But I'm still in pain." He goes, "Yeah, that's just arthritis from the surgery. You're fine now." I'm like, "No, I'm not fine. I'm still in pain." And I said, if I knew arthritis was a side effect, I would have never let you cut my back open. So long story long, I went on to have some cortisone injections, started on some pain pills, and the cortisone injections were the best thing ever. They took the pain away. So you get a cycle of 3 shots, you take a shot a week, and every week you got progressively better. Well, after I got the first shot, I felt good, but I still went back the second week and got one. I felt like a new man. So I kept training like a power lifter. And then my wife got frustrated with me because I did that and kept going heavy and re-injured my back again. I think my second surgery was maybe 2 years later, or at the most, yeah, probably about 2 years, maybe 3 years later, I had to have surgery again. And it's the same process. I have surgery, I feel better, I start training, keep competing, and it hurts again. So after a while, I was like, maybe after a while, after 5 surgeries, I finally got the message and stopped. But yeah, you don't want to stop because I knew I'd go to crap if I stopped training. So
And what were the other surgeries besides the back? Like, I
back,
mean, that the back's major, of course, but
yeah, no, I had rhinoplasty. I had a deviated septum. When I was younger, again, we were talking about being invincible. I thought I could fight, so I did the martial arts for a while, and then I got into a little boxing for a while. But I told you I was slow, so I'd take a few shots to the face, but I'd do that to get 1 or 2 shots off. But anyway, all the hits in the face deviated my septum, so I had that operated on. A couple cysts removed off my neck, a cyst removed off my wrist. Uh, Appendicitis, of course. Well, not of course, but I had appendicitis. Um, I can't remember the rest of them off the top of my head, but my wife was counting them up, and she was like, you've never been to the hospital for me, but I've been to the hospital for you on 14 different occasions." So I was like, oh man, I'm a walking mess, I guess, but I still keep training.
wow, that. So, out of the 14 surgeries, which one would you say was like the major one that took you the longest to recover from? The back?
Yeah, definitely the back. Yep, without a doubt, it was the back.
And how long did depending on the injuries, usually they keep you out for a while. If you go back right away, you'll get more hurt. But did you take any time off? And did you feel depressed like most of us that I've spoke to that are really active and competitive?
Yeah, I took time off, but I always prided myself never being gone longer than 30 days. I always said that, I started lifting when I was 12, and I've never had 30 days consecutive with no training ever in my life. And I'm 59. So I don't know why I put stuff like that in my head, but I prided myself on that. This is a lifelong habit of mine. But one of the more recent surgeries I had cellulitis in my right leg. It was in my right calf. And I always tell people a spider bit me, and that's how I got it. And then the doctor said, you can't blame the spider because you don't know. It's because when I woke up, there was literally a spider on the wall, and then my leg was like on fire, like it was hurting. So I blamed the spider for it. So, but the doctor said it could have came from anything. You could have scratched it on something because everybody has bacteria on the skin, and you get inside, and that's how you end up with. So I had cellulitis. Well, after being on antibiotics, because the cellulitis will flare up every few months. After a few years of being on antibiotics off and on, finally they had to go in there and try to clean the cellulitis out because the antibiotics weren't effective. So I'm off from school, and this was whatever, 5, 6 years ago. I'm off from school for like 2 weeks. I'm all wrapped up. I got a drain that's been hanging out my leg for 2 weeks. I'm trying to get back to school, and I'm supposed to go to school within 2 or 3 days of that. I walked down the stairs of my house and back up, and I ruptured a vein, and I started bleeding out. And the drain they had in my leg kept filling up with blood, and I couldn't empty it enough to fill up. And my calf was swelling like a balloon. So, my wife went into a full panic mode and had to rush me to the ER. And they said that they were just going to fillet the back of my leg like a fish and open me up and find that bleeder in there. But they compressed it enough that they didn't have to end up filleting my leg. But my
Wow.
right calf is really different than my left. So that was a pretty bad one because they said if I had tried to make it all the way to Omaha and not went to the ER here in Lincoln, I probably would have bled out.
Wow. That's I haven't heard of anything like that. And how long ago was that?
So I was teaching. I started teaching in 2015. So that was probably 2017. And I was out from school for 2 weeks. So, you're worried about burning all your leave. You want to get back to the weight room. You're coaching your kids. So I was like, I got to get back. I got to get back. And I only had 2 days before I could return to school. And just on the humbug, I walked down to the basement, came back up the stairs, and I ruptured a vein. It was just a weird thing that I had that bleeder. But if I was patient and stayed in my room and sit in that recliner like I had been for the previous whatever 12 days, if I had did that for another 2 or 3 days, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But I was like, no, you're fine. You can go down there. And full disclosure, Ray, I would go downstairs because my weights are down there, and I would do upper body work because my leg had the surgery. My upper body was fine, right? But I never told my wife that because she'd be highly upset. I'm not worried about it. She's not going to look at my podcast, so I'm not worried about that. But really stupid thing to do, right? Going downstairs, hey, my leg had surgery. Don't mess with that. But we can at least work upper body and do something because you've been off for almost 2 weeks. So yeah, I probably almost contributed to my own demise.
And now, you've been a high school coach for how long?
Since 2015.
And I mean, if anyone goes to the Athletic Definition Instagram, you can check out the bio or the Facebook of you, and it's really impressive. Really too long to list, but from all the knowledge that you've acquired, why like high school kids do you prefer to teach versus adults? Is that you know, or like really young kids?
Um, so I like that age because I have no issue per se with adults, but a lot of adults don't move well. And a lot of adults, like myself, have an injury history, and there are a lot of things they can't do or they won't do or things they probably shouldn't do. And it's a lot of work programming for adults. And I feel like you're constantly in a state of regressing and progressing. The different than kids. You're regressing because you have an injury or you had a previous injury. So we got to regress because of that. With kids, the majority of them have no injury history. They can do everything. Even the ones that aren't genetically gifted, they have no scar tissue, they have no injury history. They can do everything. You just need to teach them to coach. So that's why I like that age group. I've coached at the collegiate level, and they can really do everything. And I like that age a lot, but they don't need you because they're already grown. They're living their life. They're adults. You're good to help them get better physically, but you're not making an impact like you are on a 12, 13, 14. I mean, what we do with high school kids, with kids in their adolescence, that's life changing for them. When you get a kid that's 19, 20, when I was at college, a third of our football players probably are already fathers. So, I mean, how much am I going to impact their journey? I mean, they're well on their way in regards to their journey. So it was just an opportunity for me to make a bigger difference. Younger kids, when you get younger than middle school, it's not my philosophy that they need to go through any resistance training. They need to play sports and do stuff that's fun. I tell them to do tumbling or gymnastics or something, but I really don't want to train them until I always use the age of 10 just as a hard number for, once you hit the double digits, then you can start picking up weight. And that just depends on their level of maturity. But I really, really favor that high school age.
Yeah, for me, I prefer, as you mentioned, it is tougher with adults. They do have more injuries, but I prefer adults. And then teenagers and younger than 10, I don't really like to coach. You have to have a certain patience for that. And the good thing, there's different types of people for that.
Right.
So,
Yeah, God
uh,
bless them.
yeah. And, you did one presentation and I was busy, and it was during the ATG summit. And there was a lot of good presentations that week, or I don't even know how long it was, but you were talking about, and I had to leave because I was in a different training. But I was
Mhm.
watching yours during lunch, and it really caught my eye, and I really didn't get to hear what you mentioned. But you were talking about this one like high school kid, because for people listening in or just joined in, you were a coach in Nebraska. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And there's a lot of minorities over there. Uh, I
Yes,
think you mentioned a lot of them don't even speak English, and
that's correct.
yeah, there was one particular kid that you were talking about, and you were saying something about that. Uh, back then you used to think differently, and you kicked him out because he wasn't wearing shoes. He was wearing sandals, and
Yeah.
I heard you mention that later on. I think that day he committed suicide, and it wasn't nothing because of what you told him, but uh, I think you were saying that really made you kind of change the way you know you talk to the children in your perspective, and I kind of wanted to follow up on that. It was really interesting to me.
Yeah, when people ask you your coaching style, my reply was always my coaching style is very militaristic, and I always thought it was. We all are products of our environment, and the thing I cling to the most, I cling to my military background, and even when I left there and I went to the Department of Justice. 90% of the employees are former military. So it's a paramilitary organization. So I've lived the majority of my adult life being in that disciplined, structured mindset. So when I transferred from that, I retired from the Department of Justice and started teaching the high school level. I couldn't put my life experiences on the back shelf. They came with me. And so when I started teaching at the high school level, I was still very militaristic. And when I look at it, sometimes it was necessary because I taught in a school that had some kids with challenging background, and some kids were very difficult, and we had a lot of behavior disorders, that type of thing, and they needed a strong adult role model. We make the mistake. I know I'm digressing here. We make the mistake sometimes in the school system of thinking that if a child comes from difficult circumstances or they lack supervision, like myself, only has a single parent, whatever, that child needs to be given grace and needs to be given a break. And I get that to some aspect, but what we do in the school system is we give you a pass on everything, and we don't hold you accountable to our expectations, and there aren't consequences for your actions. Well, I don't operate that way. I don't believe in coddle conditioning. And I tell my administrators that, my peers that, and I tell my kids that. These are the expectations for the weight room. This is what I want you to do. Get it done or get out. And I'm serious about that. So I came in like that. But this experience you're talking about, it was a young man that was an incredible athlete. It had nothing to do with what I did. Between his genetics and wherever he came from, he had already learned to lift very well. And his technique on the Olympic lifts were almost mind-boggling. For him just to come in, couldn't speak a word of English, and I couldn't speak a word of his language, but I was fortunate enough that his platform mate acted as a translator between us. And the thing that frustrated me, like you alluded to earlier, was this young man, he would lift so well, and he wore those flip-flops, the kind that have the rubber thing between your toes. And it drove me crazy because I was like, if he lifts this well in flip-flops, if he had proper shoe attire, proper foot attire, he would be even better. And we even went to the extent of buying shoes for the weight room. But even before that, I gave him shoes. And I'd give him a pair of sneakers because we have donated sneakers, whatever, athletic shoes, because that is a requirement that they wear that. I gave him shoes. He'd wear it that day, and then he'd go home and he'd come back in his flip-flops. So I get mad. I'm yelling, and he's always smiling. I'm yelling at him, and he's smiling, and that frustrates me even more. And the interpreter is trying to tell the kid what I'm saying, and he's telling me what the kid is saying. I'm like, you need to have shoes on. The kid's going, I have shoes on. I'm like, those aren't shoes. Those are flip-flops. He's like, in my country, they're shoes. I'm like, you're not in your country. You're in Nebraska. It snows. It's the wintertime. You need some shoes on your feet in the weight room. And he just smiles at me the whole time. And and this went on for a period of time. I mean, I had him for a whole semester. This went on for weeks, but he was by far the best lifter I had that semester. But when I came back to school, I don't know if it was a holiday break, I can't remember, or over the weekend, when I came back to school, that's when I had found out. And I talked about there were counselors in the hallway and people from our district office, and they were trying to console some of the kids and was talking to everybody. I didn't know what was going on. And one of the coaches stopped me and told me that the Sonny had tried to take his life and he was in the hospital on life support. And he ended up like 2 or 3 days later, he had no brain activity, so his family pulled the plug and he passed away. And all I could think about was yelling at him. So that was the thing that initially made me think the way I'm going about doing things definitely is not the right way. That is not the last impression you want to have in your head of your interaction with a child. So from there, I changed my behavior, but I still have expectations and there's still consequences. I'm not going to let them take over the farm. But I talk to my athletes and my students, or my student athletes, more different now than I did back in 2015. A lot of our kids, like I said, come from challenging backgrounds and they've been through a lot of stuff in their life. And, Tom Brady's coach, Coach Martinez, said he has a philosophy of shit or ice cream. If a kid's went through a lot of shit in their life, he feeds them ice cream. And if a kid has had it made, been entitled, and had ice cream the whole life, then he makes sure he gives them some shit. So Coach Martinez has passed away a few years ago, but I kind of like that philosophy. So I kind of bear in mind that you don't know what everybody's been through or going through. That young man took his life over a girl breaking up with him.
Yeah, that's tough, and I know it probably happens more often than we'd like to think about. And I think another subject you were touching on was that a book you read that the young mind doesn't develop, I think, till age 25, and I'm sure that has a lot to do when you're young. You're trying to deal with emotions, your girlfriend, boyfriend, they break up with you, things like that.
Yeah. That book was called The Teenage Brain. And again, something else that caused a paradigm shift for me, what was that book? I was, I knew they were young and that the kids don't perceive things as adults, but I thought just because I was telling you this, so I told you this, and you understood it. Now you could carry it out. Like maybe before you didn't quite understand or you didn't know what the expectations were, so you had an excuse. But if I explained it to you, then you know what it is. Then there should be no problem in you following my instructions. But they aren't soldiers in the military. They aren't adults. They forget a lot, and you have to say the same thing a lot. Sometimes 2, 3, or 4 times a day, and they don't really. I mean, we're not important to them. They don't really pay attention to us. They pay attention to their friends. Now they pay attention to social media. So what I'm saying in the weight room is almost a non-factor to them, or they'll do it just to keep me off their back, but it's not a priority to them. Their friends are the most important thing to them is their social group. And then probably social media after that, and then maybe parents or whatever. But the teacher, you're way down the line. So I had to understand that as important as I thought I was, I really wasn't that important to them. And that if I wanted them to do things, I had to find a way to connect with them in regards to the things that interest them to make what I wanted them to learn more interesting to them, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And, right now with what happened with COVID and since you're working with children, do you feel that, I hear a lot that maybe people kind of in that time forgot how to communicate or feeling awkward. Do you sense anything like a big change with the kids that you're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you I told you, I've only been teaching since 2015, so 7 years. And this is by far the most difficult year that I've had as a teacher and that any of my peers. And I work with people that have been teaching 20 something, almost 30 years. And this is the most difficult teaching semester they've been through since we came back post COVID. And, we knew that they were away from school and that they missed a lot of the education part. I don't think we really took in consideration their socialization part, and that they've been home and they're not always supervised. There's always not structure or discipline in their life. Some of them are left on their own to do what they want or do nothing if they want. And they weren't around the other friends to grow and to mature. So what we're finding, that is a lot of immaturity to a level that I can't even explain to you, that they are so immature. It's like you're here now and you're in the ninth grade, but you're acting like you're still in the sixth grade. Does that make? There's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things, but there's a lot of tag and touching and tickling and slapping and normally ninth grade boys don't do that. Ninth grade girls don't do that, but uh, my weight room is probably 60% male, and there's a lot of real uh, immature actions that are just mind-boggling to us as a staff. They don't know how to relate to each other, and they don't know how to relate to us, and we are struggling trying to relate to them. I bet if you could track the stats for incidences of whatever violence, vandalism, assaults, fights, whatever, I bet you they have escalated at an all-time high. I would bet. And I have no idea what they are. But just from what I see and what I talk to with fellow teachers across the nation, everybody's going through the same thing. It's not just my school district. It's not the state of Nebraska. It's across everybody that I talk to across the United States.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were home, like you mentioned. Some people were supervised, and I'm sure that a lot of kids socialize through watching TikTok, and that
Yeah,
doesn't help your social skills or your communication skills. It only helps your scrolling skills.
right.
And you mentioned that you're 59 years old, and you don't miss more than 30 days, and you're still working out to this day. So, how many days a week are you working out now?
3, sometimes 4, but I like 3. When I go 4, I'm kind of pushing it. So if I go 4, the weight has to be light or moderate. If I try to get in a heavy day, or definitely 2 heavy days, I can only lift 3 days a week.
Okay, and uh, have you ever just pretty much done lifting, or did you ever do any other type of competitions?
No, I had two boxing matches when I was in Kansas City where I actually got in a ring in front of people. Outside of that, it's always been lifting. Even if it's just like local CrossFit meets or whatever, maybe one or two of those. A couple of martial arts tournament, but besides, I mean, it's a tournament, it's a point tournament, so it's just contact. Besides that, it's always lifting. It's either powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah, I did some boxing. That's very rough. Sometimes I would be bleeding with the first punch, just gushing, and that was the first punch. I'm like, man, the fight's barely starting. It's round one. I got like so many more to go. Um, I
So you
wanted to
probably
ask
really
you.
have a deviated septum, huh?
I never had surgery, but yeah, it's
You-
it's a nice gift that I got there. Um,
yeah.
I I wanted to ask because like just from training with ATG, I didn't know that you actually got to train with Poliquin. How
No.
was that? No,
Yeah.
did you
No.
get
I
no?
didn't. I didn't
Oh,
train with
you got some
Coach.
sort of certification?
Yeah. So
Did you get?
he did.
So how does that
Yeah.
work?
He did online. He did an online certification. Man, it was called Poliquin's Strength Theories, and I want to tell you it was like 1998 or 99. And he mailed you the book, and then you studied that for a while. Then he sent you the test, and you take the test and send it back to him, and then he'll let you know if you passed or not. So it's funny because once I started ATG, my wife dug that out, so I have the little Poliquin. Poliquin's principles book and my little certification. I think it was 99 or 2000. So that was my first certification. So bear in mind, I've been training people since 19, when in the military in 81. I started in 83 when I was in Alaska. I had my first client that I got monetary compensation for was 1983. I trained people and I didn't get my first certification until 99. And had, like I said, had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, the certification. It's as I mentioned, I could go to gyms and they don't want to hire me with certain certifications. They want these for online. You don't need any. The other thing is, before I had certifications, I thought people are going to ask you, what's your certification? And then no one ever asked you, oh,
No.
your certification, who's it from? Like,
Yeah.
so it's relevant and at the same time, not important, for your knowledge, but at the same time, you can, from experience of teaching many people like you, can develop many different techniques and go through many different programs and kind of mold it into your own as well, even without going through that certification.
Right. It, like you said, it's necessary for some organizations, and they'll have specific ones that they want. And I think that a certification is um, a good way to show that you have foundational knowledge anyway. But it's not by any means the be all to end all, because there are a lot of people running around with certifications that probably shouldn't be coaching other people. And there are a lot of people without certifications that are great coaches. So, if anybody asked me, I'd recommend they did both. I would recommend that they get at least a certification, if not a couple. But the knowledge you gain, like you said, from other people, from other courses, seminars, other coaches was way more important, even than what I learned in college. What I've learned from other coaches has far surpassed what I learned in college.
Well, I only did a semester of college, but I feel that the information I've learned through physical fitness, through coaches and courses I paid for has definitely surpassed that as well for me myself personally. And
Absolutely.
I know you're a high school coach, but do you train people on the side as well, like outside of school? Do you have like other athletes that you're training, or just normal people?
Yeah, I just started that again. When we first moved to Nebraska, I trained in a private facility, and and I was fine with that. But I started connecting with so many kids that I thought I could have a bigger impact. But there was no way I could have a bigger impact because I didn't see the kids until after they got out of school. So you could see them from 4 or 4:30 until 8 or 8:30 when they got to go home and go to bed. And one of my friends said, if you want to have a bigger impact and have a larger audience of kids, you have to get into the high school. So I had to go back to college. When I was here in Nebraska, I was 50 years old. I had to go back to college to get my teaching certification just to be able to teach. So I went back to school, got my teaching certification. And then you have to hope, and I didn't know this until after I was done. And my advisor goes, that was a gutsy move. You have to hope somebody gives you a job because, then I was 51, almost 52 years of age. She was like, you could get a kid 22 years old out of college and they could teach for 30 years. They're not going to get 30 years out of you because you're 52 when you get your teaching certification. So I didn't even think about that part. I just went back to school and went, yeah, I want to have a bigger impact on a larger audience. So that's what I did.
Well, no, I'm glad you did that, and sometimes it's better not to know. You might not have done it, and look at you
Right.
now. You've been coaching kids since 2015 now, and I'm sure you've made a lot of impact with the kids. And then besides that, like, uh, are you coaching online since that is what the kids are doing nowadays?
Yeah. No. I tried and I had this conversation with Keegan. Um, Coaching at school, and then I had a couple of my former athletes like, Coach, can we come by? Can we come by? They wanted to come out of the house because I had weights. And I finally talked my wife into okay, because she was like, nope, don't want a lot of people at my house. And I was like, no, I just do it out of the garage. So it took me a year to talk her into let me do that. So I started training out of my garage, and I said, I just trained a couple of kids, just a couple, just because they need it. And my whole mindset was I would get middle school kids because when they get to high school, they can take strength and conditioning. You can't do that in Nebraska in middle school. So I wanted to help prepare them for high school. That was my game plan. And I ended up with some middle school kids. And then I started getting high school kids that weren't taking strength and conditioning in their schools. And I was adamant about that I didn't want to take away from the high school. I don't want to take kids away from training with the high school strength and conditioning. And I didn't want to take kids away from training with their team. I wanted to prepare kids so when they got to high school, they knew what was going on. I'm also not a fan of people in the weight rooms in high schools that have no business in there. And I've seen that too many times to be comfortable with it. And as a matter of fact, I went before the education board here in Nebraska to try to get some kind of policy change so that you'd at least have to have a certification of some sort and then continuing education units to be able to train in high school weight rooms because you're in charge of people's kids. So yeah, I started training after school. I got some kids to come over my house, and I started doing it 2 days a week. Now I'm up to 4 days a week, and I'm going for about 3 hours after school every day too. So I stay pretty busy for an old man.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, how many days are you training? And I follow you on Instagram, so I see all the kids you're coaching, and it's
Right.
impressive. And then besides that, I think you what is it? You have 4 kids, and I think some of them are still competing. So
Yeah. So
or is it?
yeah, just my daughter. So I train 3 days a week, Monday through Thursday, and I start right after school. So I go from 4 o'clock. I do 2 sessions a day. So from 4 to 5, and then another session 5 to 6, and I do that 4 days a week. Friday is my family time. And then my youngest daughter is the only one home. Both of my older kids are grown. My son has a son, so I have a grandson and a granddaughter on the way in January. But the baby, she's still here, and she's 15 and playing volleyball, and that season just finished, so she's doing basketball now, and she'll do track in the spring.
And do you coach her, or for that extra like the other kids, just to be prepared, or are you
Oh yeah,
getting?
yeah. She grew up in the gym. Yeah, from the time she was born, we had our own private facility when we were in Kansas. We also trained people on Fort Leavenworth on a military base, and then in the evening we trained kids on Fort Leavenworth. We were contracted through the government to do that, so we are constantly training kids. So my daughter grew up in this environment. She was picking up little bitty 1 pound dumbbells, as soon as she could walk. And you can see with a kettlebell, I post a photo of her every now and again. She could barely walk, and she had a kettlebell sitting down in a perfect squat. So she grew up in the weight room, and she competed. And she was my child, so I started her early. She competed, I think, like the age 8 or 9. She was a Kansas State weightlifting champion. Then we moved up here, and she was a Nebraska State weightlifting champion. Then she stopped lifting. She didn't want to lift anymore. Broke her father's heart. Um, and took a break for like 3 years from lifting. I didn't want to force it on her because I didn't want her to hate it. So I let her take that break. And then her friends started coming around. They saw that they needed to lift to get better for sports. So she started lifting again. So I was glad to have her friends, get excited about training.
Yeah, the friends can come in handy sometimes because
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, it's hard to get attention as a parent. And so, I've for everyone listening in and everyone in the audience, thank you for joining. I have Coach Stu's Instagram going on the fortune cookie. But if anybody else did want to contact you, do you do like online coaching or anything like that?
Yeah, I would love to do some online coaching. I just haven't had any takers, and um probably my messaging, because I'm all over the place. Like when you see my Instagram, you'll see that I post all over the place. My son made me start this a few years ago. I wanted nothing to do with social media. To me, I just saw people either posting pictures of food or people being mean to other people. And I said, yeah, that keyboard warrior stuff, I don't want any parts of that. And he's like, Dad, you always talk about meeting kids where they are. They're on social media, so you need to do it. So my son started my Instagram account. I had no idea how to do it. And then I'd have my student assistant take videos, but then I didn't know how to post the videos. So my kids would take the videos. Then I had other kids would edit and post it for me. And it was working well. And then they're like, Coach, we're going to graduate. You have to learn to do this. So they taught me how a few years ago. So now I post all my own stuff and edit my own videos. But I mean, I post my kid playing volleyball one day. I post me and Coach Watson lifting one day, and then I have my kids at school lifting one day, and the kids in the garage. So I think I'm just throwing stuff out there, and I'm not trying to target an audience per se to specifically get online clients. But I would love to give a try with some online clients. I'd love to see people's videos and write programs and see how they progress, to see how that works for me.
And so they can contact you through the Instagram.
Yeah, they can DM me on that Instagram page, and I get right back with them. I want to say within a couple of hours, but definitely within 24 hours, I get back in touch with them.
Great. And yeah, you can go on the Athletic Definition Instagram and just kind of look at all the. I mean, it would. The great thing is, this is my show, and I'm not going anywhere. So, I plan to bring back uh, my guest because as the audience starts to get to know him, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I remember him," and then we don't have to repeat the whole thing. But you got such
Right.
a long history of experience that we just barely spoke a little bit about, your knowledge and your life history and your experience, basically. But I know there's a lot more. Just some of the things that I was hearing you mention today, I'm like, uh, definitely want to keep peeling the onion more. Uh, but I definitely appreciate you coming on. And is there anything maybe that you want to promote or give a shout out to that maybe I forgot?
Oh, Coach Ray, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it's an honor for me. Like you say, I'm a I'm an old high school coach in Lincoln, Nebraska. Didn't figure I really have that big of a story to tell. So just the fact that you were interested in wanting to sit down and have a chat, I'm honored by that, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this for me. ATG has been really good to me, and it has connected me with a lot of good people. I mean, not just in Nebraska or across the states, but internationally. So I owe a big debt to Keegan and Ben Patrick. So thank you, and all the ATG coaches. You just keep this thing going, man.
Yes, so far I think I've only had Luke on here, and you're the second ATG coach. But I'm working. I'm sending messages, and eventually I hope I can get Ben and Keegan on here as well. But
Absolutely.
I'm trying. I really believe in, since, learning playing different sports, going through different certifications, doing a little bit of everything, boxing, jujitsu. What they're showing in ATG is not something that I've learned in. so many different types of training. It's something that a coach has showed me. So I really believe it's valuable. And I'm like very like if I've had a couple offers like, oh, sell this product and we'll pay you this much, but I don't use the product. I don't believe in it. So I don't like this whole show is only about spotlighting the people I want to spotlight and that I feel that are being honest and have a good product, and they deserve a spotlight, and they don't get that they don't have those 50,000 followers. There's a lot of people out there like that. So
Right.
I'm glad you made the time to come on, and people will get to know you more.
Thank you. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, no problem, man. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. I will be back next week with all new shows, Athletic Definition, on Thursday and Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific Time Zone. This has been Coach Ray, and thank you once again, Coach Stu. Everyone, thank you for joining.